Get with the flow, feeling the rhythm, the bounce, remind me. Wacha kulala, changamka kiasi, haya basi. Up and away we go. From the bottom we rise, look at the light in our eyes. See it, believe it, I see no lies.
Um, yeah, so turns out with technological challenges means I have been talking on mute this entire time. So, yes, going back to my introduction, my name is Leanne Munyori, and I am a service designer at Marathonxp. And again, back to the statistics, in 2015, Nielsen Group um, uncovered that 75% of millennials are willing to pay more for a product if they think or it is sustainable. And I say if they think because sometimes marketing can be used disingenuously to praise itself or its products as sustainable, even though it really is not. A follow-up study in 2019 went on to show that a lot of consumers, 79% to be exact, want to know how exactly is a company, how is your company actively dealing with or actively addressing issues of environmental and social um, justice. And then in 2021, 80% of cost savings can be achieved if business transitions into a more circular or environmentally friendly model within 5 years. And I know, I mean, when I say up to, it's a range, and this is because the when it comes to cost savings and sustainability, if your company then has to regulate thermo sustainably regulate thermal temperatures instead of using an AC. It means your cost of electricity or running that company in terms of keeping the area cool or hot when it's really cold goes down. The type of electricity bulbs that you use might also lead to a reduction in that cost. How your water usage is within that building. However much in during COVID we moved to working from home, there are some companies that still need to operate from a physical location. So what exactly do we mean when we talk about sustainability? Now, for a business, that means you need profit. We have seen a number of advertisements. If you're either a big business or an entrepreneur, about how do you grow your business, and growth comes down to the bottom line of the money that you're making. But it also is about people, the people that where the business is operating, the people that work for you, the people that supply, the people that you're serving with your product or service. How is it positively impacting them? And to round it off, it is also about the positive social, environmental impact that you have on the planet. Are you just taking resources that are finite, and then what happens after that? Or are you actively working towards regenerating the earth? And that goes to a whole wide range of things, including biodiversity, tree coverage of forests. And so it's to sum it up, it's about the triple bottom line: profit, people, and planet. And I'm sure we've all interacted with that at some point in our day to day life. And so, what exactly is service design, on the other hand? So, when we talk about service design, it boils down to experience. It is an experience economy, and it's one of the reasons we have ratings. When you get into an Uber, afterwards it asks you, how would you rate it? When you use a service, 5 star on a scale of 1 to 10, we have interacted with some sort of survey or um, some sort of questions that asks us as consumers, as users of products and services, how exactly we found that. And as a business, you want your review to be fantastic. 5 stars. Oh, I would recommend this to everyone I come into contact with. It's a great, magical experience. Um, but on the other hand, rarely do people necessarily say when something is going right, because if it's supposed to be working, then that means good design is almost invisible. So secondly, that experience is delivered through certain services. So if it is transportation, it's a transportation service, but there's a car, there's a driver, using again the example of Uber. And so it's about certain channels that we use. For Uber, it's the car, it's the driver, it's how they welcome you, it's how the car smells when you get in. Is it clean? Is it dirty? Music, the type of music that they're playing during your ride. Do you want music? Do you not want it? Do you want to listen to your own podcast? And lastly, again, it's about people. So I, I think there's a theme that's already building here. So people here, it's not just the users of your products, it's your suppliers, it's your staff, it's the community in which your business operates, because there are some invisible impacts or unintended impacts that are not necessarily visible during the ideation phase when you're thinking about delivering a service. And so some of the tools that we use when we think of service design is a service blueprint. So what are some of the activities that are happening? Who, what type, what is the user doing in each step of that activity? And there's the interaction that is direct, there's the one that is not as direct, and we also have the support staff that help to manage. Like, again, for the example of our Uber, there's the stuff where you say you can call in or you can write an email to say I left. If the driver is not picking up the phone, who else do you go to, right? So that would count as a support staff. So why should we merge the two? I mean, they sound pretty good independently, but why again should we do it? So it's a way to innovate for solutions. An example, when we think about the greenhouse gas emissions and the war on cars that is currently ongoing in a lot of sustainability circles, maybe not maybe, but product service systems have been devised where you don't necessarily need to own a car in order to move from one place to another. So ride sharing then came up, which means that you can either have someone drive you around. In some instances, you you can hire out a car and use it for, let's say, like an out of town trip if you mostly live in the city and you don't necessarily see the need of having a car, but you want to go with your friends to Naivasha, say for the safari rally. So how do you get there? If you don't own one, you can hire one, you can carpool. So there are different types of way to then use to then achieve the outcome of moving from one place to another without necessarily owning a product like a car. Secondly, by merging the two, you can enhance your brand image. We before we saw that majority of the millennials are willing to pay more for a product that is sustainable, 79%, which is quite close to, I mean, when you consider half, more than half of the population is, more than half of the millennial population is willing to pay more for a sustainable brand, and they're currently, their buying power is constantly increasing as, in comparison to the boomers and the Gen Ys. It tells you something about having to move more towards a sustainable image without greenwashing. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And lastly, there is it it creates resilience or durability for your business. So instead of having to import things that will take a while, or having your, which then would mean your customers have to then move to your competitor, you can source your materials or your supplies for your business locally, which means you're also empowering that community in addition to reducing your carbon footprint. Um, this will then, I mean, it's not just about the people. Again, we go back to the ecological footprint that, or the impact that is happening on the land or air and other living creatures. Because in as much as we are focusing on people, we're not the only living creatures that are living on this earth. And so a good example that I've come across is Patagonia. They are an outdoor attire brand, and they are making steps towards moving towards a more sustainable model, where including how they do their business, who they're hiring, in terms of is it a safe working environment? Is it fair? Are they getting remunerated at a rate that is not oppressive? What are the working conditions as they make these products for sale, and the types of materials that are sourced? Trying to keep that in in circulation. They also have it's almost like a tailor van that goes from place to place. So if you have any one of their brand, let's say like a running jacket, and it's torn or worn, they can stitch it up for you. So in the end, it doesn't end up in land waste, because one one reason there is waste, or rather we can ask sometimes, why do you throw things away, right? And the why, other than how much is being thrown away, is just as important, which is um, how, or rather it's where service design can come in very handy, because it uses a lot of qualitative research. And you can also reference back to our fast spaces by Lynette, who um, was fantastic in explaining how research is conducted and how we do it specifically here at Marathon. And finding that why can then help transition the business into a more sustainable model without necessarily forcing individuals to buy things that they don't necessarily feel aligned with who they are. And so we've talked about all that. What do you do? Yes, we've preached at you about sustainability and service design, but what actions can what are some of the high level strategies that you can employ to then go in a different direction? So designing for disassembly simply means that it's, say I have a charger, and because of in our case there was a blackout in most parts of the country, and the influx as the electricity was coming back and leaving meant that a number of people's electronics got blown up. And sometimes it's just one single part of that electronic, say like a charger, that's blown. So you don't necessarily need to throw away the entire charger. You can just take it back to the dealer or the manufacturer and have that particular part um, um, reinstalled, the old one taken out and the new one So you can, it's basically Legos, but for products. You can take out the pieces that don't work and then reassemble them with a different piece that actually works. So that makes it modular, makes it easy to repair, and expands the lifetime of the product that you have if you do own a product. And a good example is Repeat, which is by Saint Gerard. They're headphones that can be disassembled. So if the cable has been bent and worn in so many different that it no longer, or your right headphone, your right piece isn't working, but the left one, the sound quality is magnificent, then what do you do? So they have shown that it is possible to create for disassembly. So the second one is biomimicry, which I find is fascinating because it's basically learning from nature. And a good example is Velcro, like on kids' sneakers, which was basically inspired by a plant that is very much like the blackjack. So because it sticks and it's very hard to take off, oh, what can I do with it? I'll make Velcro. So a fastener. And for trains, the streamlining is basically to make it go easier, which is same as for a lot of the birds that we know, and the kingfisher specifically. So the train in Japan was made to one be uh, fast, and because of that speed, it means that the sound bar as it breaks through the sound barrier, there's it creates such a loud noise that can be frightening. So how do you have a fast train that is silent? And they took inspiration from the kingfisher because as it moves from air into water to catch fish, it makes such little noise as it splashes into the water. So the splash is basically muted, if I were to describe it. And for transport networks, there's there's the mold that was it uses the most efficient way to find food, and so it creates like a very intriguing network. And if I'm not mistaken, China has used it to create a transport route network that is most efficient. So it didn't have, it's not a grid system as you would find, let's say, in the US, and it's more flexible and natural, which means that you get to experience less delays in traffic or in a gridlock. And so, what do you get when you um, take the shape of a calla lily and merge it with engineering? So a company called Pax created this device right in the middle, which was in the shape of the flower, but also took into account the same motion that hurricanes or vortexes have to make sure that they supply the municipal council with clean drinking water. Because what causes bacteria to develop is stagnant when it's stagnant, because all the microbes that help to keep the water fresh are then basically just dying. So this mixer then managed to do that, and it runs efficiently 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So that was pretty cool, I would say. So, um, and the last thing that I will touch on as we're doing this very high level is being collaborative. So you having partnerships within the ecosystem that you have. So if you are, um, say again, using our example of Uber, you are running a rideshare company. Who else is in that ecosystem? Is it your if you're now getting electric vehicles who can provide you with that infrastructure, either whether it's charging ports for that for the batteries, whether it's parkings, if it's a parking lot that has solar panels as the shade, which then provides renewable energy to charge your vehicles, have integrated services across different stakeholders, and also policy advocacy to then create an environment that enables the partnerships that you have to actually work. Um, so a good example here I came across is Loop, who who have reusable packaging that the branding can then be peeled off if it's going to be repurposed for something else. So and they've partnered with different brands, so across soft drinks, across, as you can see here, detergents. They partnered with retailers, so supermarkets like Carrefour, but not in my country, which is Kenya. But and restaurants, so chains, coffee chains, who they can then supply you with a coffee cup, which you can keep bringing back into the store at a discounted rate. So and there's less waste, if any. If you're using this product, then there's no waste that is going into landfills. So now that you have the strategy, what tools can you use? What frameworks can you employ to then move from strategy to being a bit more tactical and implementing things? So we all know of a business canvas, but what value proposition can you then inject into that model? So this is one example of a business canvas that takes into account external stakeholders, the environmental costs or impact, the social ones for different groups of people. Are they negative? Are they positive? And what activities are causing those impacts? Secondly, we have life cycle modeling, which looks at basically the lifespan of what is the journey of your product, from the materials, where they're sourced, how they're being sourced, uh, does it get sorted, does it get recycled, does it get upcycled, does it get repaired or refurbished, can it be disassembled, as we had mentioned before. So what is the tightest loop that you can make, because that would be the most efficient one to then go by. So the idea is to extend or to make things last as long as possible, not have, or so the ideal is to not have waste. But if in the end that is what we're going to have, can we extend the time that this particular product can exist, which means there are services that will support the longevity of it. And lastly, it's, so now that you have those tools, how can you, if you're an existing business and you've been around for as long as Methuselah, if you know the reference, how then do you transition, and what are some of the barriers to change? Because if you have refined a way of working, it just, I mean, it's almost like muscle reflex, and now having to move to a different model means that there is a bit more effort, there will be some friction. So what are some of those barriers to change? Who are the stakeholders within the business, and what are they fighting for, to what are they fighting to maintain, or what do they want to maintain, and how can you help them find a win in the new model? How can you then, what are then the steps to move to that to that transition? So it can be worked out, and this is one of the tools that can be used for that. So when designing for sustainability, because as a business there are users, and for the economy to run, we do have consumerism, and quite honestly, I don't think we can strike out consumption in in our equation. So, and there are people who there's a group of consumers that is eco-conscious, and so that forms part of their values. But the ones that don't, what happens then? So if using public transport is more sustainable, and you are one of the you're a company that is supplying the public transport with the electric vehicles or buses, how then do you convey the message to someone who, for them, time is more essential than actually, than using an electric bus to and from work? So then the messaging becomes a little bit different, and it appeals to the how they can save more time, or they can work on the electric bus because you have charging ports that are powered by the solar panel that's on the roof of your bus. So again, service design and the research that backs it up can then help you figure out what your consumer value is and how to communicate that to the consumer. Secondly, what are the core company strengths, and how do you leverage those to then transition into sustainability. And again, research and service design can help you do that. How do you is it the reach that you have? Is it the existing infrastructure? And reach here can be also in terms of the collaborators that you have. Um, and lastly, it's digital solutions. So can you use, let's say, tracking for? I mean, like at the moment, Uber uses they can show you what is the most efficient route to use, right? So in the same way, how excuse me, how can you use tech to help you manage um, your business better? So if it is a sensor that goes off when no one is in the room, or turns off your water when some people do forget to close it, or just generally would not want to touch the faucet knob after they've already just washed their hands. Is it one that measures how much, uh, tracks the usage that you have to help you realize where you have energy leaks? So these are some examples of how you can use tech to help you in becoming more sustainable as a business. So as promised, we're going to talk about greenwashing. And we know that there are some companies who will willfully tell you that their products, their services are responsible, they're environmentally friendly, they're fair trade, just so that they can sell more. And we have various versions of greenwashing. So how, as a business, how do you actively move away from greenwashing? Because the pressure to um, move into something that feels trendy but actually has impact can be hard if the right infrastructure is not in place. And this can be policy infrastructures, it could be physical, it could be um, internal, how your internal business works. But then succumbing to, I mean, it's the age old issue of if you can't beat them, join them. But you can actually beat them if, again, you merge sustainable, the principles of sustainability with the practicality that comes with designing better for it. So some of the barriers here again come into the short-term profits as we just talked about, but navigating that change is thinking a bit more long-term and taking smaller steps towards making that transition, because it can feel very daunting. It's a huge task. I mean, and there are times even as speaking as a consumer, I'm feeling how will not tossing, how will not throwing trash save the whales? It feels very distant, and so taking smaller steps towards that larger change becomes a bit more actionable. Secondly, it is acknowledging that it's a complex system. One thing does not operate independent of another, and so um, knowing this, it means we also have tools for complexity in systems, and at least trying to understand different parts of that system and how they interact, how there's a ripple effect if one variable is changed. And so we run it back to, in terms of navigating that complexity, again, the small steps will then add up. In Swahili, we say haba na haba hujaza kibaba. So just the smaller steps, they accumulate. And lastly, it's the traditions of a company, how you've already been running, it's smooth, it works, and if it's not broke, why are we fixing it? So um, looking for inspiration from startup culture, because they they adjust easily, and they're constantly asking how can we do it better, or how can we do it differently in a way that does one, two, three, so that you know can still help us pay our bills, can make us feel like we're doing something that is meaningful, and at the same time we are enjoying life. And so some of the case studies, as I had earlier mentioned about uh, product service systems, there are different models where you can either um, have sell a product that you then sell a service for, like a washing machine, you sell it, and then you offer installation, maintenance, you sell a warranty, or something that is a little bit more service focused. And so Airbnb is one of those things that now, instead of just owning a home, and if especially for digital nomads, you can rent a place for the, it has that flexibility of, I can look for things that embody me and my personality. It has a certain quirk that says, oh yeah, that definitely has a hint of Leanne in it, and so rent it for the period of time that you need it without necessarily feeling boxed in or having to, excuse me, um, maintain it. And so it helps with creating certain models that can someone else can then build upon. And same goes for Tesla with the electric vehicles, and um, with the charging ports that are then installed. However, we also know that there are certain limitations. But again, even the same way with academia, where you study, there are gaps in a particular study that someone else can then build upon, because one, trying to tackle a whole animal like climate change or excuse me, again feels like it's too large a task. So, we bite off smaller bits as we go around. And I'm sure there's someone out there who's thinking about how the batteries in electric vehicles are going to be managed. So now, moving into more local examples of businesses that have a sustainable model, we have Jijenge, which is a fantastic initiative. And it's the challenge here was to address plastic waste. So they the solution here was to create plastic pavers, which are, as you can see, they have vibrant colors. The texture on it also makes it safe. So when it's wet, it's very hard to sleep on them, because, like, I mean, ideally, when I think about plastic, I rarely think of textured plastic, but yeah, so they clearly thought about that. And some of the outcomes of this were, one, alternative construction products, because again, so the how they started is that they were collecting plastic waste faster than the the whoever they were going to give to could absorb it. And so this was born, which I think is a wonderful story. And it also created job opportunities for the communities that uh, were involved in the collection of plastic waste. And then we have Little. We know them for the cab share, the ride share, but they also have electric bikes and scooters. So the challenge here was to help with the challenge of greenhouse gas emission. And so the outcome, one, would be both an economical saving, because you're not, if you have your own car, um, and we know of the rising fossil fuel prices to power our vehicles. So that would be one. It's economically friendly, and you can rent it, use it to for the distance that you're going, and then leave it at the next station. And it also has the environmental benefit of, again, not emitting greenhouse, soot. I'm sure you've passed behind a bus that when it's in second gear, you will be smelling of that soot for a bit. At least until you get home. And thirdly, we have Flippy Floppy. If you haven't come across them, the most popular item is a boat that is made entirely of flip flops, which are slippers, the butters and the pata. And out of that, so that was mostly an advocacy tool. So they would sail across the shores of across our shoreline. All they went around Africa and back, and out of that, they now create. So the seats that you're seeing right now are made from plastic, extruded plastic. So it's heated. It's um, processed the same way sausage would be processed, and then it's just plastic, and then it's molded into this, and they would then carve beautiful etchings. So this is done in Lamu. So the main solutions here are, other than innovations for the seats, there's the influence and the education, the the noise that they're making around single-use plastic. That you would rather have plastic that is reusable. I mean, because again, it takes time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. So for them, they're specific about single-use plastic, and so in terms of education and influence, it's to help with behavior change in terms of how we consume, how we buy, what we buy, and how the that will be used or how it will be disposed of. And go check them out, please. So to recap, we have been talking about service design and sustainability, defining what it is, the business case for sustainability, because again, if a business keeps making losses, it's no longer going to be a business. So how do you make the triple bottom line, the money, the profit? How do you create positive impact to people in in the different levels or the different hierarchies, the different circles, how often you interact with them, and implementation tools, excuse me, how the strategies that you can use, some of the tools, and there's so many out there. I mean, at least, yeah, there's quite a number of them out there, but we're only covering three because of the time that we have. Some of the challenges that we face in transitioning to a more circular or a more sustainable uh, business model, how you can then how you can then see or identify opportunities, and some real life inspirations, because we know not all heroes wear capes. So now that we've talked about that, what next? We can embrace innovation. And innovation here, I mean, just keep your eyes open, because there's so much inspiration to be drawn from quite a number of things, as we saw within nature itself. As people are talking, you can hear something that can then spark an idea. So keeping our eyes open, our minds open as well, having a pen and paper on hand, and it doesn't have to be a physical one. We now always carry our phones with us, so you can just quickly make a note of it, do a sketch, and out of that, go have a conversation with a friend, a colleague, and see what comes out of that. um, Engage, talk to your customers or your users or the collaborators within your field, peer-to-peer learning in terms of businesses. Um, what what are some of the challenges that they're facing? How do they overcome them? If they are in the sustainability space, what are they doing differently? So talk to people, ask questions, and be genuine as you're doing this. And then lastly, have measure, even with that humongous goal that is to be as sustainable as possible, set them in measurable ways. What are you doing? Are you fast looking at your energy consumption? Are you looking at how you pay your where you source your materials? If it's a service, how ethical is the service that you're providing? Are you paying people a fair wage? We've heard or read stories on whatever platforms that we're on, fast food joints that don't allow their staff to actually eat from their own establishments. So what are those sustainable goals that you have? And once you meet them, you can then push it a little further and keep pushing the envelope until you're being referenced in. Hopefully, this will be an honor if I do reference you or if someone else does. And um, that being said, if there are any questions, you can reach out to the Marathon team, and we'll be happy to respond to you. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day, evening, afternoon, and we'll see you next time on the X Spaces.
The rhythm that bounce your mind me, wacha kulala, changamka kiasi, haya basi, up and away we go. From the bottom we rise, look at the light in our eyes, see it, believe it, I see no lies. juggernaut, we run, skip with the flow, feeling the rhythm, the bounce, Jumani, wacha kulala, changamka kiasi, haya basi, up on the